Okay, so before we start the sixth chapter, I just feel like I need to express a little bit, just share some thoughts. Beginning of the 3 weeks, the time of mourning for the Jewish people, we, for the past, really for our entire history, but acutely in the past while, don't need any kind of excuses to mourn. There's been enough things going on in our lives, personally in our lives as Jews, that we don't necessarily, it shouldn't necessarily be difficult to muster up a little bit of energy to mourn over the destruction of the temple. But it is, and it is difficult, especially 3 weeks to maintain that thought for 3 weeks, that sensitivity for 3 weeks. I don't really want to talk about the 3 weeks, so I will at the end. But I really want to talk about what's going on in our lives, that we have, for the past year, been under the thumb of Corona. And I won't say suffering from Corona, because for some people it wasn't suffering, and it didn't have to be suffering. I'm saying to a person who wasn't sick, a person who was just in lockdowns. Lockdowns were difficult, emotionally difficult. They were psychologically difficult, no question about it. But there was also room for a person to be able to thrive and grow during lockdown. There was a lot of very, very positive things. I don't feel like I just went through this horrific experience of Corona. It was what it was, and for me there was a lot of growth, and a lot of changes, and a lot of really good things that I took out of it. There were difficult things. I made a wedding during Corona, and it was difficult. It didn't have all the impact that I would have wanted it to, perhaps. But kids are married, they're happy, I'm happy. It's like, why that doesn't really matter when you look at the big picture. These things are really very small. And then after Corona, then we have Meron. Then there was another tragedy that slipped by some people. On Erev Shavuos, there was a shul, there was a chasidus that was preparing for Shavuos and just built a new Beis HaMedrash, and we're dedicating the Beis HaMedrash. And there was a terrible tragedy of the collapse of the bleachers. There were 1,000 people in the room. 2 were killed. It turns out really 3 were killed, because one just died on Erev Shabbos. Somebody who since Shavuos has been in the hospital. And then Miami. It's a gefährliche thing in Miami. And you have to wonder, and everybody does, we wonder what's going on, what kind of message is God sending us? And we get lost in the negligence, and we say, in Meron there was negligence, and in Carlin Stollen there was negligence, in Miami there was negligence. Yeah, it could very well be. And I feel like I've given this talk before, and that my head has gone to this place in the past months, numerous amounts of times. But I feel for myself, at least, that I need to repeat it and to rethink about it, because that's only noise that's really distracting us from the main thing. And the truth is, there's a lot of noise going on in our heads. The negligence thing, and somebody's to blame, and then looking at it saying, what could God want from us? What did we do wrong? All of that stuff is noise. There's a pasuk that we say in Tehillim. The pasuk says, "Shivtecha umishantecha hema yinachamuni." Mizmor leDavid Hashem roi lo yachzor. Song for David. God is my shepherd; I shall not want. He lies me down by green pastures. And then in the middle of that psalm, it's a gorgeous psalm. It's a psalm of trust in Hashem. And in the middle of that psalm, we say the word Shivtecha umishantecha. Your stick, your rod, and your staff, hema yinachamuni. They will give me comfort. What does that mean? Shivtecha umishantecha hema yinachamuni. Your staff and your rod will give me comfort. God's rod and his staff is what he uses to bring puranias, to bring suffering, to bring pain. What God uses to exact retribution, what God uses to bring difficulties in the world. Your staff and your rod are going to give me comfort. So imagine a situation where son says to his father, Dad, there's a fair that's going on. I really want to go to the fair. Father says to the son, there are so many people at the fair. You're going to get lost. It's going to be a terrible experience. I'm not going to take you to the fair. And the kid presses on the father constantly, Dad, please take me to the fair. Take me to the fair. I just want to see what's going on there. There's so many incredible exhibits, all the new technology. Dad, take me to the fair. And finally, the son prevails on the father. The father takes the son. And he tells the son that when we go, you have to promise me that you're not going to let go of my hand. And the son promises, Dad, I'll never let go. And they're walking through the fair and they go exhibit after exhibit. And finally they see this incredible exhibit. And the father is staring and looking at it. And the son is looking at it with such interest. And then finally they realize that they've let go of each other. And the son looks around, he can't find his father, and he starts to wail. He's crying, he's screaming, Tati, Daddy, where are you? Where are you? And the father realizes that he let go of his son's hand, that his son let go of his hand, and he's looking around, where's his son? He's calling out his son's name. And then finally the father spots the son. And the son sees the father, and the father is running towards him, and the kid is wailing. The father gets to the kid and he gives him a little patch. And he says to him, I told you never to let go. And amazingly, the kid stops crying. Because shivtecha umishantecha heima yanachamuni. Because when there is a rod and a staff, they will comfort me, because at least I know you're there. And at least I know you care. And at least I know that I'm still alive. A dead person can't be resuscitated. A live person can be given medicine, can be given resuscitation, can be given that which is going to be able to help him increase his life. We have to recognize that when crazy things like these are happening in the world, just count back the last 100 days of things that have gone on in our Jewish world. Besides Meron, besides Kalin Stolin, we just went through a war. You can't imagine, unless you've experienced it, hearing a siren at 3:30 in the morning and having to get out of your bed, and your least worry is yourself. You're worried about all those people that can't just jump out of bed and go into their safe room. And all those children that spend day after day after day after day inside of bomb shelters, petrified to go out for 1 second, who are traumatized. Miami. Just look at the past 100 days, what's been going on. There isn't a question in the world that the Rebbeinu Shalom is calling out to his people, and that there's an alarm clock that is blaring in our ears. And when we hear those words at this point, after having listened to it for over a year and a half, our eyes, whether literally or figuratively, roll up into the back of our heads. Oh, it's another talk about hearing God's messages. You're right, it is. Because clearly, as a Jewish nation, we're not hearing the message. Because if as a Jewish nation, we would hear the message, then things would look differently. Last week we talked about it. My son and I did this podcast on pleasant politics. Is it an oxymoron? If you haven't listened to it, it's not a bad idea to listen to. Because that's the indication that nothing has changed. Nobody's looked at it and said, you know what? I think I need to be a better person. I think I need to talk finer and talk in a better way. I think I need to be a little bit more kind and giving to other people. I think I need to worry a little more about my lashon hara. I think I need to daven a little better. I think it's time for me to start putting on tefillin every day. I think maybe davening a little bit every single day might be a good idea, to add a little bit of tehillim into my life. Maybe a little daily learning into my life. How many people in our Jewish world have looked at it and said, I'm going to respond to the call of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Thousands of rabbis have talked about it. Thousands of people have listened to tapes and read and listened to podcasts and listened to shiurim and have read letter after letter and article after article. It's time for the Jewish people to wake up a little bit. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is calling out to us, and it doesn't matter the reason he's calling out to us. It doesn't matter the specifics of why he's calling out to us, but he's calling out to his people and he's saying, I'm here, I care. And I want you to show me that you care back. I want you to show me that it matters to you. I want you to show me you recognize me. Anything we do is recognizing God. Any increase that we make in our lives. The problem is, I think that we're not talking about it in practical terms. We're talking about it in theoretical, spiritual terms. We're talking about it in esoteric terms. But in practical terms, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to see from his nation is he wants to see a change. And every individual member of that nation has to decide what that change is going to be for themselves. And it has to be something tangible, and it has to be something real, something that you can look back to and say that in that year and a half that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has been banging on us, that he's been sending us subtle signs, he's been sending us all of these messages. This is what I do to show that I'm listening to his message. Every person knows what's missing. You can't fix it all. But you can take something, bein adam lechavero, something between us and other people, something between us and God, and add it into your life. You know, what's the point of these 3 weeks of mourning? SHABBOS TABLE, 2 days ago, working its way all the way through until Tisha B'Av. What's the point of this? Well, why do we have this period of time? So if I were to walk around the world and say to people, what are we doing on SHABBOS TABLE? We're remembering the breaching of the walls of Jerusalem, which led to the destruction of the temple. Walk around in Tisha B'Av and say to people, what's today all about? Oh, today is all about the destruction of the temple. And they were mourning over the destruction of the temple. And that's not what it's about. We're mourning over the erection of a wall of steel, of a mechitza shel barzel between the Jewish people and their God. From the time of the destruction of the temple, that's when that wall went up, and that wall has never been removed. And year after year after year after year, we sit down on the floor on Tisha B'Av. During the 3 weeks, we let our beards grow. When the 9 days we don't eat meat, we don't drink wine. And almost for not a second do we stop and to think about the distance that exists between us and God. And even those whose God is so present in their lives, but to feel a sense of distance, to feel a sense of blockage, of a blockade that doesn't allow us to completely open and completely feel that connection. And certainly as a nation, that mechitza, that barrier that exists, that sense, that feeling that I've let go of God's hand. Tati, where are you? Somehow that hasn't made it into the 3 weeks. Somehow that hasn't made it into the 9 days. Sometimes we relegate these things to the place of the religious. Yeah, the really religious guys, they worry about the 3 weeks, they worry about the 9 days. It's for the entire Jewish people. It's a matter of consciousness. A person can keep all the halachos of the 3 weeks of the 9 days, can fast on the 2 days at the beginning, at the end, the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av. He can refrain from eating meat and drinking wine during the 9 days. He can do all the things as he's supposed to be doing. He can sit on the floor in Tisha B'Av and accomplish nothing. Because there has to be that sense of that there is a problem, there is a distance. And that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is calling out to us. Shiftecha mishantecha hemi nachamuni. We have to feel a comfort in the sense that we know that God cares and that we need to show him back that we also care. It's a valid question that every single person has to grapple with. How did your life change? Not just your perspective, not just your loss of business, but how did your life change since Corona? Not how to get worse, not what was taken away from you, but how did you become a better person? What did you do? Practically, literally, as small as it might be. What did you do since Meron? 45 Jews died in a terrible tragedy. What did you add into your life that said, God, I'm hearing you? God has told us clearly, he still cares. There's still something to resuscitate. What have we said back to him? How have we reached out to grab his hand? The rabbis in Tractate Nedarim, when they talk about the destruction of the temple and remembering the destruction of the temple, they recognize that people often scratch their heads and wonder, why did all of this happen? And the prophet tells us because we didn't make the blessings on the Torah, that we didn't make the blessings on the Torah. Every morning in our blessings that we say, when we get called up to the Torah, we say the same blessing. There's a special bracha that we say on learning Torah. It's recited once a day. It's recited in the morning. But it's called Birchas HaTorah. And because we didn't say Birchas HaTorah, because we didn't say the blessings on the Torah, that's why all these tragedies have happened to us. What are you talking about? It's not a capital crime not to say Birchas HaTorah. If you learn Torah without making the bracha doesn't ruin the Torah. The Torah is the Torah. How could it possibly be Shelo Berchu b'Torah Tchila because we didn't make a bracha on the Torah first? That's the reason why all these tragedies happen? Because what the rabbis are telling us is Shelo Berchu b'Torah Tchila means we took it for granted. And that we didn't look at it and say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, God, you're the source of all of my blessings in this world. Asher bachar banu mikol amim, you've chosen us from every other nation. And you've given us your Torah. Blessed are you, God, who is the source of all the Torah, who is the giver of the Torah. Because we weren't jumping out of our skins to recognize how lucky we are to have a Torah. What an incredible advantage in our lives that we have this beautiful, incredible, awesome Torah. We just took it for granted. It's the way it is. We got the shock of our lives when Miriam died. Because for 40 years, we've been getting water from Iraq. There were little rivulets that existed between every single tribe. It was like living in Venice. It was incredible that whenever you were thirsty, it was right there, right in front of you. For the righteous people, it was sitting mamish right in front of them. They had nothing to worry about. And then all of a sudden, Miriam dies. And what we took for granted for 40 years, now we got shocked into the realization you can't take this for granted. There's no guarantees. And we've been shocked day after day, week after week, into realizing that you can't just take life for granted. You can't just take the way we exist for granted. One of our problems is why in now this period of time, in the 3-week period of time, in the period of time of mourning, the reason why it's not a time of mourning, it's a time of halachic impositions. It's not a time of mourning because we take everything for granted. We don't think. There's a very beautiful video. Not sure if it was the mayor, the police chief, but someone from Miami. And he was very emotional. He wanted everyone to know, he said he's speaking personally. He came to the site as he comes every day to the site. These were his words. He said, morning, afternoon, and evening. He says, and he came last night to the site, and there was a little girl sitting there on a chair. And she had her phone in front of her. And he was curious what she was doing. And he had seen this girl before. Her father was in the building when it collapsed. Her mother lived a few blocks away, and she had been with her mother that night. And she was sitting and looking at her phone, and the way he described it is that she was aimless and she was lost, that poor little girl. And what was she doing? He described it, but he didn't even know what he was describing. She had pulled up Tehillim, Psalms, on her phone, and she was sitting and saying Psalms. And he said she was calm. She was calm because she was talking to God. Because in all of her pain and in all of her anguish, she reached out to the hand, to hold on to the hand of God. She wasn't lost. She's suffering. She's in pain. She's not lost. Because she knows in all of that how to reach out and to hold God's hand. And he couldn't understand that. But we can understand that. We can understand when all of this comes down around us. When over the past couple of months, everything seems to be crumbling, literally and figuratively. We can understand. Don't be blind. Don't be deaf. Don't be dumb. Don't take life for granted. Recognize that the Rebbeinu Shalom is calling out to us. And he's saying to us, just reach out and hold my hand. And that's what we need to be hearing. He still cares. Because if God abandoned us and left us, there would be none of this. This is all because we're worth saving. Shivtecha umishantecha heima yanachamuni. All we have to do is just reach out and touch God's hand. And we can do that by adding something into our lives. You bark at people all day long? Stop barking. You speak Lashon Hara? Every time you have a cup of coffee. Cup of coffee is like a conduit for Lashon Hara. You sit with another person, and bingo, outpours Lashon Hara. It's like truth serum. So maybe it's time to get a book on Lashon Hara and to start to learn the laws of Lashon Hara, of what you're allowed to say, what you're not allowed to say. And it's never going to change overnight, but it's touching the hand of God. Maybe you always thought about tefillin, jealous of the people that put on tefillin every single day. Just get a book, a little book. It's 40-something pages. It's called Tefillin, Profound, by Rabbi Kaplan. Read through the book. And then those tefillin aren't so scary anymore. You put on tefillin every day, but you have no idea what you're doing. If someone would ask you, you wouldn't really be able to describe exactly what the tefillin are. Get that book. Make that your point of increase. You do all of those things. Say a little Psalms every day. 121, 130. Say some Tehillim. Say some Tehillim to say, God, I love you. I'm reaching out and touching you. Add a little bit of learning every day. Every day, one thing. Another verse in the Torah. Another section of the parsha. You don't have to get out of your chair anymore to do that. It's not that you don't have to leave your house. You have to get out of your chair. You have to get out of bed. It's all right there at your fingertips. All we got to do is just lift our hands, which is sometimes the most difficult thing. Lift our hands and touch God's hand. And then none of this will have been for a waste. Because we will have heard a message. Is it the message? As I always tell people, I don't get paid enough to be able to tell you what the message is. And if I did, then I wouldn't be Rabbi, I'd be God. I have no idea. Anybody who says they have an idea is a fool. We have no idea specifically what God's trying to tell us, but generally what's God trying to tell us? Reach out and show me you care. That's what these 3 weeks are about. That's what this past year, this Corona year has been about. And that's the message that we need to hear. God is calling out to us and saying, just stretch out your hand to me. And that's my job. And that's every one of our jobs. To figure out a way through all of this in the memory of all those that have died, in the memory of all those who have left people behind, who are now living lives in pain, so that their memory continues on. We need to do something that sends a message to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We are hearing you, and we care. We are still alive. And when we do that, that's the beginning of the repair of the Jewish people. That's the beginning of the rebuilding of the Jewish people. And that's the beginning of the Geula, of the redemption. For 2,000 years, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has been waiting not for us to be religious, not for us just to learn Torah and to build yeshivas, not for us just to have amazing communities, but as people, to see us turn to Him and say, we care, we're still here. And to touch Tati's hand. To reach out and touch God. It's a little bit of a perspective. It's not anything that surprises anybody that I would say it. It's not anything that I haven't said before and that the world hasn't said before and that our Torah leaders haven't said before. After the first time that something happened, okay, you can understand that. The second time, the third time, the fourth time, prolonged pain and prolonged worry. It's becoming more acute and more acute that we need to listen. And then we need to wake up. This is our shofar call. Uru yeshenim mishinaschem, wake up, you sleeping ones, from your slumber. And as soon as we wake up and make that little significant move, then the world changes. And everything changes. Because that's all the Kodesh Baruch Hu is waiting for. Those are my thoughts. It's in everybody's minds, hearts, and hands to do something. Every one of us has to take it and wash it into our own lives and to figure a way that we can use this idea and this message to improve our lives and ultimately to improve our world. Okay. We'll stop here. And Yetz Hashem, we hear only good things, only B'suras Tovos, good news, good tidings, good things. And the Yetz Hashem, the mourning and the crying and the tears should be wiped away, and that we should know from no more suffering.
Amen.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Very powerful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry to put you to sleep that way, but it's what we're living in. It's not, it's like I feel like it's not. I had no choice but to talk about it for myself. Even I just have. It's just we have to be thinking about it. It has to be on our minds. Okay. See everybody next week.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.